Breaking news tonight, the coronavirus outbreak declared a global pandemic.
Could possibly be the mark of the beast.
Today, the World Health Organization officially calling it a pandemic.
The Pope holding a global blessing in an empty St. Peter's Square.
I'm issuing a stay-at-home order effective Thursday at 12.
Tracing people using a smartphone.
Bottom line, it's going to get worse.
Keep an eye on neighbours and dob them in for breaking COVID rules.
Masks and face coverings will be mandatory.
Permanently shut down his personal account.
A race for a COVID vaccine.
To seal off the Victorian state.
Close places of worship is actually
mandatory quarantine.
Unemployment nationwide.
Executive orders.
Francis asking people to come together tonight.
He said,
Restoring the common good.
Antifa is an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got it.
Not militia.
the time to act is now.
In part one of Unmasking the Mark, we used the Bible to identify the beast, its image, and its mark. We saw how the Bible defined its own prophetic symbols, and how, using those definitions and not the interpretations of man, we have correctly identified the Antichrist beast that arose from the sea as the Roman Catholic Church system. The second beast that was coming up out of the earth around 1798 as the United States of America, and the image of the beast as the evangelical Protestantism that will so control the civil policies of the United States of America, it will become effectively a church and state government. Furthermore, we saw how these three powers will unite to enforce the observance of Sunday, the pagan day of sun worship, as the mark of the beast. But identifying these powers alone will not save anyone. It is imperative we understand the underlying principles at war in the controversy, that we might not be deceived, and that we might make our decisions intelligently. So let's continue the investigation of these prophecies in Unmasking the Mark, beginning with the economic systems of control and how money will be one of the means of bringing about this crisis.
Meteor is headed to crash into our economy.
Businesses across the country are experiencing operational chaos as new data.
The coast of Los Angeles, the reason you're paying more for everyday items.
The only way we're going to get to a place where we work through this transition is if everyone in America and everyone around the world gets vaccinated.
Minister Narendra Modi pulled nearly 90% of banknotes from circulation last year.
Registers people using biometrics.
The government assigns an ID number attached to those biometrics and stores the information in a centralized database, so people here don't have to carry a physical ID.
The chip is inserted, and 4,000 Swedes, now get this, have microchips implanted in their hands.
I thought it would be fun.
And I feel like I'm reading out of the book of Revelation, possibly.
This is the mark of the beast. This is, listen, no, let me tell you something. I mean, I'm no biblical scholar here, but it's amazing the parallels made.
The prophecy tells us the mark of the beast will be enforced by restricting who can buy and sell, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. When the enforcement of the mark of the beast is close, we should expect to see major changes to the economy in two ways. First, by associating the ability to buy and sell with adherence to certain laws, moral or ideological views, which undoubtedly would be said to be for the benefit of society, for the good of all, so that compliance is necessary in order to buy, sell, or travel or function in society.
Many American companies, from Google to CNN and United Airlines, have made the vaccine compulsory for staff. The alternative, look for a new job.
The French government is trying to speed up its vaccination drive by making life for the non-vaccinated more complicated. Access to trains, domestic flights, and restaurants and bars will only be allowed for the fully vaccinated.
Secondly, we would expect to see major changes in the ability to enforce and control buying and selling. And with the pandemic, we see startling and significant changes in both directions.
Now to the debate over so-called vaccine passports.
Want to go to a game at the Garden, Stray? Show me your passport. Want to go to a Broadway show? Show me your passport. Want to go to a concert? Show me your passport. So how about if you want to go to this college? Show me your vaccine passport.
But if you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things. That's the point we're trying to get across.
With regard to controlling buying and selling, obviously we can see how a cashless society would be easier to control. since it can be monitored and controlled electronically by computers. In a pandemic, no one wants to touch it. Why cash has become the new typhoid Mary. The article reads, "This crisis is clearly pushing us even farther away from using cash in our everyday legal transactions. And it's for obvious reasons. No one wants to touch something you or someone else just touched. That's not going to change anytime soon." On March 23, 2020, Forbes magazine said coronavirus stimulus offered by House Financial Services Committee creates new digital dollar. They reported this signals the US is serious in establishing infrastructure for a central bank digital currency. The day after the Federal Reserve Bank introduced the digital dollar as part of the stimulus check, the digital dollar was removed from the stimulus plan. So, cash lives on, but not for long. Pandemics in particular are used as a strong advocate for moving toward a more controllable currency. One article stated coronavirus could speed up introduction of a cashless society, and the World Health Organization urges people to go cashless, saying banknotes can carry bacteria or viruses. What better method is there to move to a completely digital currency than by making people afraid of cash?
Well, health experts say the coronavirus can live on surfaces like cash for up to 10 days.
I mean, it's already got me paranoid out here. So I'm in there getting hand sanitizer and bleach, but I don't know, I guess now you gotta wear gloves.
Businesses are banning cash.
If you order a burger or a beer at one of Rhode Island's newest restaurants, be prepared to pay with a card.
These signs are popping up too, asking customers not to use cash.
Customers call for a boycott as Woolworths, a grocery store in Australia, bans cash at selected stores. In July, the New York Times wrote, "Our cash-free future is getting closer." They say the pandemic is propelling a shift toward a cashless society in ways that no other single event has. As more and more businesses do away with cash, the ability to track and control the buying and selling of the entire global society increases dramatically.
So how slippery is the slope we're standing on? How quickly could this be implemented here?
The technology you see in China exists. It's working, and it can do the same thing here. Right now, our sort of regulatory legislative action just isn't there. We don't have protections to say it couldn't happen. Young people growing up in America today are pretty used to being surveilled by their phones and their Facebooks and their Snapchats and the rest. We might have different constitutional protections, but it's still unsettled.
Fed opens door to digital dollar and battle for your privacy. There are certain things you could do with a blockchain payment system that you cannot with alternatives, such as geofencing politically sanctioned countries, blocking suspicious addresses, identifying suspicious activity in real time. Clearly, such power would provide opportunity to target just about anybody. Robert Wenzel points out why this won't likely stop at monitoring bad guys in a recent blog post. This means that perhaps down the road it will have the potential and may block anti-social justice spending or politically incorrect spending.
But here's the catch. One of these days, God forbid, Scotty, you defy, they find you guilty of something. And you go before a court. And they say, we're going to sentence you to prison? No. We're going to turn your chip off. And you don't exist.
Imagine a scenario in which doctors speak out against the mainstream narrative and call the COVID pandemic over because a cheap over-the-counter drug can easily, almost in every case, rid a patient of COVID.
And the video went wild.
Yeah.
And that was really bad news for the enemies of liberty, because all of a sudden it gets taken down. You know, Twitter went after them, and they really came down hard on them.
The government could very easily put a block on spending at all those doctors' practices, stopping them from buying and selling so that their dissenting voices are silenced and their clinics become prohibited from operating. And it's not hard to imagine the same happening with individuals. After the January 6th event at the Capitol, President Trump was immediately blamed for the event, and without a trial or a hearing, his banks started closing his accounts. The credit card processor Stripe dumped the Trump campaign's website, refusing to process online transactions. Another article reports Trumpers aren't welcome here. Chase Bank cancels General Mike Flynn's credit cards. Again, all of this was done without due process of law in violation of the 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendments in the Bill of Rights. But laws are only of force when they are enforced. If these basic rights are not upheld for the president or his staff, they will not be upheld for you or me. In September of 2021, the Biden administration proposed a plan that would give the IRS access to more information about your bank accounts.
The administration's plan to allow IRS snooping on Americans' bank accounts. The proposal would require banks to report all customer transactions of more than $600.
It is not hard to see how even now, government and smear campaigns are being used to persecute anyone they deem to be harmful without due process of law, even when it comes to monitoring and no doubt even controlling your bank accounts.
They may claim this is about going after the rich, but the fact is if they have information on everybody's bank account like that, then eventually this becomes an excuse not just to audit the rich, but to continually audit anybody who they think might be a little bit out of line.
It's not hard to see how those who speak out against Sunday not being the Sabbath of the Bible and do not comply with Sunday laws will be prohibited from buying and selling with the flip of a switch. Satan says, "I will so control the minds under my power that God's Sabbath shall be a special object of contempt. A sign? I will make the observance of the seventh day a sign of disloyalty to the authorities of earth. Human laws will be made so stringent that men and women will not dare to observe the seventh-day Sabbath."
Businesses will now be closed on Sundays.
We will have people at the markets there watching you and holding you to account.
For fear of wanting food and clothing, they will join with the world in transgressing God's law.
No jab, no job.
The earth will be wholly under my dominion.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
And this is what this is about: obedience to God or to Satan. There are only two choices, and all will be forced by economic circumstances and control to choose one or the other. And if controlling buying and selling isn't enough, CNBC reported the coronavirus crisis could pave the way to universal basic income. So now, not only would your buying and selling be monitored and controlled, but also your income. And who is leading out with this call for a universal basic income? It is the head of the Antichrist system himself.
Pope Francis calls on popular movements and organizations to consider a universal base wage.
In his Easter letter over the weekend, Pope Francis said this may be the time to consider a universal basic wage.
Forget about getting people to work. How about free money, universal basic income?
And then there is the great expectation of financial collapse and an economic reset.
I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
It is a global commitment they have made to use the panic and fear generated by the coronavirus as a means to reshape all our economies and laws. Already the Great Reset is being widely advertised on posters. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It's not only a great reset, it's a great deception. Because in order to get everyday people to surrender many of the rights and freedoms we currently take for granted, the repeatedly stated aim of these organizations is to deliberately use COVID as an excuse to use all the political and authoritarian tools that are currently being used around the world to eradicate the virus, such as lockdowns, exclusion zones, forced closure of businesses, heavy fines, making protesting illegal, and so on, but now to eradicate carbon emissions. Those behind this scheme are adamant that there can be and never will be a return to normal.
We need a shift in our economic model that places nature and the world's transition to net zero at the heart of how we operate.
In case you are a dissident, Apple and Google are building a coronavirus tracking system into iOS and Android. And when another pandemic comes along, and when Sunday laws come along, these tracking systems will be among those used to track and enforce the mark of the beast. The correlation between the mark of the beast and the methods being employed during the pandemic have some convinced that these tracking methods are the mark of the beast. In China, for example, location tracking wristbands required on all incoming travelers to Hong Kong. In an effort to ensure travelers are staying home under mandatory quarantine, they are tracking them with wristbands. This has many worried that methods of tracking to enforce policies like this, or even using microchips or vaccine passports to see who has received the vaccine and who hasn't, might be the mark of the beast. The correlations are easily recognizable.
It's amazing the parallels made.
But the truth of God's Word, as we have seen in part 1, dispels these myths. The mark is not about technology, it is about worship. The only common ground being that the technology will be used to determine who is worshiping the beast and its image and who is not. Nevertheless, in a protest against the stay-at-home orders in Texas, citizens marched a banner through the streets saying, "Texas will not take the mark of the beast." They specifically reference vaccine chip and ID 2020. Now, ID 2020 is a project backed by Microsoft along with the Rockefeller Foundation, the United Nations and other public and private entities working towards creating a digital identity for every person on Earth. Very interestingly, on September 20th of 2019, about 3 months before the pandemic, ID 2020 and partners launched a program to provide digital ID with vaccines. So at this time, in 2019, the program to leverage immunization as an opportunity to establish digital identity was unveiled. In order to affix everyone with a digital ID, there needs to be a reason. And what better reason than to control who has been vaccinated and who hasn't in order to fight a global pandemic. This is why immunization is seen as being an entry point for digital identity. Then, with mandatory vaccination laws, the digital dollar, a digital ID, facial recognition, suspended constitutional rights, and unconstitutional laws being passed, the New World Order makes our planet a prison house to pacify the fear of those living in fear and criminalizing those who don't when they speak out against these tyrannical measures. So let's take a step back from all these efforts to control the population and examine the motive. Is it about power? Sure it is. Is it about wealth? Sure it is. Is it about control? Sure it is. But is that it? No. The last great crisis our world is heading to is about allegiance. Remember that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey. Who you obey is without fail the best evidence of who you serve or worship. The mark of the beast crisis is about all those living upon the earth making their final choice to serve God or reject him. Those who ally themselves with the Lord will embrace the sign of allegiance to the government of God by resting on the seventh-day Sabbath on Saturday. Whereas those who reject a plain "Thus saith the Lord" will receive the traditions and laws of men in place of the law of God and receive the mark of the beast. They will receive it in the forehead if they are deceived and believe with their mind that Sunday truly is the day to honor God. Or they will receive the mark of the beast in the hand when their actions are in harmony with this international day of rest. But for now, nobody has the mark of the beast yet. But when laws are passed enforcing Sunday legislation, we may know that all the inhabitants of earth must make their choice, for God or against him, and that choice will be made in who you choose to obey. The other aspect of the mark of the beast would be introducing necessary compliance to certain laws or policies in order to function in society. And here is where the pandemic has really propelled us closer to the mark of the beast crisis more than any technology.
Should people be refused entry to places like gyms, concert venues, even restaurants if they haven't been vaccinated?
Make some difficult decisions, and that's to keep people who are not vaccinated out of some of those venues that we've been talking about today.
Ostracised from society just because they're unsure about it.
Having a meal indoors at a New York City restaurant will require you show proof of vaccination.
The social mindset of the global population is being molded and changed right before our eyes, and very few seem to notice.
The unvaccinated also put our economy at risk.
Some doctors are saying they'll refuse treatment for people who choose not to get the shot.
The new social doctrine that has been widely adopted is the view that what's good for the health of society ought to be mandated through legislation and forced upon all people, effectively bringing an end to individualism and individual rights and liberties.
It's not merely a personal choice, it's a personal choice that of course affects the lives of a lot of other people.
The protection of the community rather than the individual.
In the pandemic, the idea has been promoted and adopted that for the health of our society, every individual should social distance, wear a face mask, and now get a shot, or 2 or 3. And if compliance is not obtained, individuals cannot enter a store, patronize a restaurant, or go inside the grocery store. In short, arbitrary health laws and executive orders are made law.
QR code check-in becomes mandatory tomorrow.
And economic restrictions are placed upon citizens who do not comply, inhibiting their ability to buy and sell, and even criminalizing those who believe they have a right to govern their own bodies.
I think that's the biggest thing that we are fighting for here, and that's the choice.
United Airlines tells us that firings are already underway for employees who did not want to get that vaccine.
Sending more than 150 Texas nurses and hospital staff packing for refusing mandatory vaccination.
40 San Francisco cops have been placed on leave because they haven't been vaccinated.
Nearly 2,000 workers who lost their jobs across the state.
You gotta go if you're not gonna get vaccinated. We're talking New York, Missouri, Massachusetts, California. We're also seeing Rhode Island and Connecticut.
We have leaned on our healthcare heroes so far to keep us safe and to treat us when we get sick, and now we're in the midst of firing them.
Firing them from their jobs or branding them as terrorists. This mindset is what's new with COVID-19. And when the public accepts and believes such legislation and ideals are in the best interest of the public, and coupled with fear of those who don't comply, the largest and fiercest enforcers of these laws become the citizens themselves.
Here in the city, it will be up to businesses to essentially police their customers and ask them for proof.
57% of working Americans support their employers requiring a vaccine for workers.
Businesses say they like the idea of making sure customers and staff are safe.
The clock starts ticking down to mandatory vaccination. Those who refuse to do so could be terminated.
In the United States, the guarantee of the rights and liberties of individuals helped to make this country the most prosperous and powerful nation in the world. But with the COVID pandemic, it is now being proclaimed a virtue to eliminate the rights and liberties of individuals if it is necessary for the good of society. This concept is the principle of a Roman Catholic social doctrine called the common good. Publication U.S. Catholic wrote an article entitled "What is the Common Good?" In it, they wrote, "Sometimes the common good is presented as sacrificing for the good of the whole." On the Vatican website, under the heading of the common good, the Church says, by the common good is to be understood the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. They say it consists of 3 essential elements. First, the common good presupposes respect for the person as such. Second, the common good requires the social well-being and development of the group itself. Finally, the common good requires peace, that is, the stability and security of a just order. It presupposes that authority should ensure by morally acceptable means the security of society and its members. It is the basis of the right to legitimize personal and collective defense. In short, if someone deems it to be in the best interests of society that all be vaccinated, then on this basis, a law mandating all get a vaccine is legitimate, even when the law goes against their own individual rights and conscience, which must be surrendered for the good of the whole.
We may have to look at some of our own privacy laws and the concerns about that for the greater good.
Similarly, with the common good, the speech and opinions of an individual may be censored for the good of the public.
You could say that you're all for free speech, but you also need to protect society.
Facebook is not confirming or denying working with the White House. It says this in a statement: we permanently ban pages, groups, and accounts that repeatedly break our rules on COVID misinfo.
Frankly, I think that we've distinguished ourselves as one of the companies that defends free expression the most.
And we see this censorship taking place with the mainstream media on Google, Facebook, and YouTube. Posts are removed with the ambiguous explanation that they go against the community standards.
Facebook says it will ban ads that discourage vaccinations.
Well, the company is taking down anti-vaccine videos and banning major accounts because it says it needs to, quote, remove egregious, harmful content.
On December 9th, 5 days before the electors cast their final votes on the 14th, YouTube promised to ban videos claiming 2020 presidential election fraud. So even despite 131 affidavits and 2,800 incident reports of alleged voter fraud in Michigan alone, and after the FEC chairman says Trump campaign has legitimate claims of fraud via sworn affidavits and other evidence, Facebook took it upon itself to silence any and all opposing voices in direct violation of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, which guarantees no person shall be deprived of due process of law. Even on January 6th of 2021, as the Capitol building was breached, Joseph Biden, Catholic himself,
I grew up with Catholic social doctrine.
Took the opportunity to speak about the common good, saying the preservation of a democracy requires leaders who are devoted to the common good.
Requires people of goodwill, leaders, the courage to stand up, who are devoted not to the pursuit of power, or the personal interest pursuits of their own selfish interest at any cost, but of the common good. Think what our children watching television are thinking. Think what the rest of the world is looking at. For nearly 2.5 centuries, we, the people, in search of a more perfect union, have kept our eyes on that common good.
The day after the events of January 6th, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook removed President Trump from the platform and from Instagram.
President Trump has been banned indefinitely from Facebook,
saying, "We removed these statements yesterday because we judged that their effect and likely their intent would be to provoke further violence." He also wrote, "We believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great." This censorship on Facebook is based on the principle of the Catholic teaching of the common good, that the rights of any individual may be circumvented, restrained, or entirely removed if they judge the individual's exercise of their freedoms or even their motives to be a threat to the common good. With this belief, Biden signed an executive order mandating vaccination for federal workers, forcing them to choose between bodily autonomy or their jobs, saying this is not about freedom or personal choice.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you.
Even by this statement, he is acknowledging that an individual's freedoms and personal choices must be surrendered in order to follow his mandate. And this is the fruit of the doctrine of the common good. The surrender of individual liberties for what someone else decides is good for everybody. The time has come when every principle of our Constitution has been repudiated, which means every principle of the Constitution is denied or made void. It is being made of none effect, and the Catholic doctrine of the common good is one of the most insidious of teachings that undermines the very principle of life and liberty and justice for all, which is at the heart of the Constitution. Far more dangerous than foreign armies is the Catholic social doctrine of the common good.
People and property owners have traditionally not been understood to have a right to put others at risk of catching a dangerous disease, and thus their liberties could be restricted so as to abate the risk to others.
And who decides what is the common good? Obviously, he who controls the flow of information, and who is deemed by the powers that be to be an upstanding, moral person, who decides what is the common good. And in this case, it will, of course, be the Pope.
The spirit of fraternity and solidarity, cooperating generously for the common good.
And in April of 2021, LifeSite News reports Pope Francis calls for global governance and universal vaccines. Remember how the Catholic Church stated the objectives of the common good was on the basis of securing peace and security? In 1 Thessalonians, we read concerning the coming of Christ that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. And one of the signs of the soon coming of Christ is that many shall say peace and safety, but then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. It is by advocating and promoting the common good for peace and safety that the Roman Catholic Church's social doctrine will bring America to its knees, as the Bible warned of the Antichrist, saying that he by peace shall destroy many. The doctrine of the common good is wholly opposed to the principles of a democratic republic. But as society moves toward embracing the idea of a single ideal or moral value being a law for all to follow, whether it be face masks or vaccines, then the idea of forcing all to adhere to a day of rest for the common good of the world will not be far behind. This is why a pandemic is a perfect setup for the enforcement of the mark of the beast. It changes the ideals and social values of the public from a society based on individual rights and liberties that are protected by law to one based on the elimination of individual rights and liberties in adherence to new laws for the common good. The idea of sacrificing property or making contributions for the welfare of others is a noble pursuit, and certainly one that is in harmony with the Scriptures. And all that believed were together, and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men as every man had need. And what was the result of this method? We see in 2 Corinthians 8:15, as it is written, "He that had gathered much had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack." If the disciples had adopted the doctrine of the common good, they might reason that employing force and torture would sometimes be necessary to extract repentance and conversion of the sinner in their efforts to share the gospel, seeing that it was for their eternal welfare that they confessed Jesus to be the Son of God. But this is not at all what happened, for this ends justifies the means strategy of the common good is not of God, but it is a doctrine of devils. Nevertheless, this strategy was employed by the Catholic Church for over 1,000 years during the Dark Ages, reasoning that the torture of the body during the Inquisitions was necessary so the soul could be saved. The difference between the disciples having all things in common and supplying the needs of all, and the common good espoused by the Catholic Church, is that the Catholic Church is calling for force to be used in the surrendering of personal rights and liberties, even punishable by death. A paper from a Catholic lawyer at St. John's University titled Individual Liberty and the Common Good, The Balance, Prayer, Capital Punishment, Abortion, states on page 221, according to a natural law approach, a punishment is not cruel and unusual when it is necessary to carry into effect the death penalty as an essential protection of the common good. Pope John Paul II in the Catechism of the Catholic Church had written of the death penalty as an appropriate response to the gravity of certain crimes and an acceptable, albeit extreme, means of safeguarding the common good. The Roman Catholic Church has always hated the idea that any individual may have liberty of their conscience, the freedom to decide for themselves what they shall believe. A Roman Catholic bishop wrote, "There are many who are disposed to attribute any fear of Roman Catholicism in the United States to bigotry or childishness. Such see nothing in the character and attitude of Romanism that is hostile to our free institutions, or find nothing portentous in its growth. Let us, then, first compare some of the fundamental principles of our government with those of the Catholic Church. The Constitution of the United States guarantees liberty of conscience. Nothing is dearer or more fundamental." Pope Pius IX, in his encyclical letter of August 15, 1854, said, "The absurd and erroneous doctrines or ravings in defense of liberty of conscience are a most pestilential error, a pest of all others most to be dreaded in a state." The same Pope, in his encyclical letter of December 8, 1864, anathematized those who assert the liberty of conscience and of religious worship, also all such as maintain that the Church may not employ force. A common good, determined by the Church and employed by the force of the state, is not biblical. God never compels men to obey him, but force is the last resort of every false religion. But many will not recognize this Catholic social doctrine as a false religion until its principles are made manifest in the cruel and unusual punishment of those who don't adhere to what the Church and state decide are in the interest of the common good. When the population believes that climate change or a global pandemic or any other crisis poses an immediate and deadly threat to the welfare of the planet, it will be astonishing to see how quickly the people of Earth will eagerly employ force to secure adherence to the common good, either by restricting buying and selling or upon threat of death.
Police department, search warrant! Police department, search warrant!
Jesus warned, "They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God's service." Jesus doesn't say they will kill you thinking that they are doing wrong, but to the contrary, that they will kill you thinking that they are doing that which is right, because it is in the interest of the common good, a sentiment which also came from the lips of Caiaphas, the high priest, when he said, "It is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not." It was with this reasoning that it was determined to be in the interest of the common good of the Jewish nation to kill Jesus, and this reasoning will be used once again at the end of time during the Mark of the Beast crisis to crucify Christ again in the person of his people. It will be said, it would be better for them to die that the whole world perish not. And herein lies the danger of the common good that the pandemic is weaving into the social fabric of our global culture. The pandemic has done more to convince the public to surrender their rights and liberties for the common good than could have been done by any other means. And it has done so while wearing the garb of beneficence and selfless love for the well-being of our fellow man. But even if vaccines did promote health, selfless acts, when mandated by law, the surrender of your choice, your conscience, and your liberty, can become the worst form of selfish tyranny, for they come professing a love born of heaven while cherishing the heart of hell.
Frustration with those who are unvaccinated on full display. Protests in France. That country now requiring vaccination passports for restaurants, bars, museums, theaters.
Proof of vaccination is now required across the country.
Pope Francis from Vatican City, in the context of speaking about the coronavirus pandemic, called on the faithful of the world to rise up, unite, and put a stop to all this personal and collective individualism that's going on. Just stop it, he said. Just stop this individualism nonsense right now.
The two things that concern me, one are those who just try to make this a political issue. Freedom. I have the freedom to kill you with my COVID. No, I mean, come on, freedom.
With the COVID pandemic, the world is being taught that one infected person poses a risk to the whole society. And therefore, the enforcement of things like face masks and social distancing that each individual must adhere to are legitimized because they are in the best interest of the whole. But what if an individual doesn't want to social distance or wear masks? The public consensus is already that the individual must surrender their liberty of conscience and their individual rights for the good of society.
And as a member of society, reaping all the benefits of being a member of society, you have a responsibility to society. And I think each of us, particularly in the context of a pandemic that's killing millions of people, you have got to look at it and say there comes a time when you do have to give up what you consider your individual right of making your own decision for the greater good of society.
The website Verdict, a website offering legal commentary and opinions, states, "Those refusing vaccination, with the exception of those whose health precludes it, are recklessly aiding and abetting the virus. They need to be held responsible to the public good." And the fact most of the public already considers it a virtue for individuals to surrender their individualism for the common good of the public just shows that the public is ready for the enforcement of the Mark of the Beast. But the Mark of the Beast will not happen all at once. The public will continue to be primed with the ideals of the common good until those who maintain their individual rights and liberty of conscience will be said to be of the most selfish and heinous character. And is this not already the case?
That very freedom has caused a few selfish and profoundly silly people to rattle on about imagined harms, to walk away from reason and medicine to their own self-absorbed and dangerous fantasies. Finally, anti-vaccination is intensely selfish.
The refusal to wear a mask is selfish. It infringes on the life and liberty of everyone else in the store.
If you can be vaccinated and you refuse to, that's a selfish act. you're putting other people's lives and health at risk.
It is selfish at this point to not get vaccinated.
Because it's selfish. If you're unvaccinated and you're going around without being tested, you are an arrogant, selfish SOB. You got proof of that?
For this reason, images like these are making the rounds on social media, claiming you are being conditioned to view your freedom as selfish. Even in churches, the message is clear: love your neighbor, wear a mask, subtly inferring that not wearing a mask is unloving. The message is clear: if you will not wear a mask for the common good, then others can snitch on you. This article from Daily Mail reports jittery Californians call police to report their neighbors coughing and sneezing, and Ohio County creates hotline for residents to report people not wearing face masks. In Massachusetts alone, it was reported residents burning up the snitch line, in which more than 200,000 calls have been logged.
Not dobbing in someone, it's actually calling out selfish, arrogant, ignorant behavior.
And one journalist wrote, "I want to find an anti-masker and beat them to death."
Do I believe that I'm causing harm by not vaccinating my child? No, I don't.
Well, you're an idiot.
I want to point out these things because this is the attitude and sentiment that will in the near future be directed against those who fear God and keep His commandments, especially the seventh-day Sabbath. The vast multitudes upon the earth will be led to believe that the few who keep God's Sabbath day holy are the cause of all their sufferings. And the Bible tells us the animosity directed against commandment keepers will culminate in a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. So if you were wondering, are Americans ready to hand over the virtues and values of their 244-year-old constitutional republic in exchange for the enforcement of the Catholic social doctrine of the common good? Then clearly the answer would be yes. The nations are ready, the governors are ready, the states are ready, and Americans are ready.
70% of adults in the U.S. have now received at least one dose of the coronavirus vaccine.
All ready at a moment's notice to denounce their neighbors, friends, and family of the worst forms of selfishness if they do not surrender their individual liberties and convictions for the common good.
This is my wife and my kid. I'm not leaving my wife and my kid. You people are upsetting my wife who's about to have my baby. They're kicking me out because I won't submit to a PCR test. You guys are trying to get me away from my baby. It's never going to happen.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? Their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
We will not serve thy gods. Nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up.
Vacate everyone from the building, and we will be locking the building.
Yesterday, this pastor was arrested for breaking mask bylaws.
Officers wasted no time making arrests.
After violent anti-lockdown protests swamped city streets yesterday.
The 700-person strong crowd was suddenly surrounded.
And we have to get in those communities, and we have to knock on those doors, and we have to convince people, and put them in a car, and drive them, and get that vaccine in their arm.
And just as the public is the greatest enforcer of mask mandates,
Mask, you're putting people's lives at risk.
So too, the greatest enforcers of the mark of the beast will be those closest to you. Your parents, your siblings, your friends, co-workers and neighbors, and even church members. But face masks are just one rung on the ladder of conditioning the public for the mark. Vaccines are another.
Imagine a world where you have to get vaccinated and show proof to go shopping, board a plane, or just go to work. Legally, it could happen, says University of San Diego law professor Dov Fox.
courts have found that when medical necessity requires it, the public health outweighs the individual rights and liberties at stake.
In short, when it is decided that those who do not get vaccinated pose a risk to the public health, then forced vaccinations will be justified, of course, in the interest of the common good. A global pandemic is being used as a means to mandate a vaccine, which is a perfect way to introduce to the world a means of monitoring and controlling all aspects of society that the public will heartily embrace. And once these methods are in place, then any other global issue that mandates a global solution can be easily implemented, and only those that adhere to the new criteria will be allowed to function in society. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio posted on Twitter, "If you want to participate in society fully, you've got to get vaccinated." With these sentiments, one can easily see when a global day of rest becomes the chosen solution to all the world's problems, such as climate change, everything will already be in place to enforce it, just as the Bible foretold, restricting all who do not obey it from being able to buy or sell.
The planet is changing for the worse. Scientists, environmental activists, and the United Nations agree that existing climate protection measures are insufficient.
This is why COVID-19 has propelled our society closer to the enforcement of the mark of the beast, because all the laws and policies being proposed and implemented as solutions to a global pandemic are the same laws and policies that enable the enforcement of the mark. Those that are already convinced that they and others should give up their individual rights and convictions to wear a face mask or get a vaccine will not find it a hard matter to surrender their religious convictions to receive the mark of the beast, or ask others to do the same. The time is not far distant when the test will come to every soul. The mark of the beast will be urged upon us. Those who have step by step yielded to worldly demands and conformed to worldly customs will not find it a hard matter to yield to the powers that be, rather than subject themselves to derision, insult, threatened imprisonment, and death. While we talk of the mark of the beast being a future test, we must not fail to see in mandatory vaccinations the exact same principles. Jesus said, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." So let's ask the question, who does the body of the believer belong to? The Bible says, "What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." According to this verse, your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. Consequently, ye are not your own, because you have been bought with a price. Therefore, your body is God's. Now, if an employer, a company, or a governor, or even the law of the country comes along and demands of you your body, which belongs to God, what are you to do? Do you see that this is the exact same test as the mark of the beast? The principles are all the same. Will you obey God or man? Will you render unto Caesar that which is God's? If asked to render to Caesar that which is God's, we are told we ought to obey God rather than men. The question over the vaccine mandates is akin to a pop quiz, a small trial to see if you are ready before the big test. If we were not prepared to render unto God jurisdiction of our bodies which are His now, I pray we may seriously consider these things diligently, that we may in a health crisis be like Daniel, who purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. The policies and laws being proposed and implemented during the pandemic are fueled by fear. And when people are fearful for their lives, reason, prudence, and critical thinking are quickly sacrificed on the altar of self-preservation.
Until I get the shot, I'm staying in this room. Until I get the second shot, because you got to get 2 shots, I'm staying in this room. I have to trust that if Dr. Fauci says it's good, I'm taking it, you know.
How wonderful it is to love Christ, to have the indwelling of His presence that casts out fear. If more people knew of His love, how few would be manipulated by their emotions and fears. With the indwelling of Christ's own Spirit comes the promise that when He, the Spirit of truth, is come, He will guide you into all truth. And with the understanding and wisdom that Christ brings comes genuine freedom, As Jesus promised, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. When coronavirus hit, along with it came a sense of fear, because most people felt threatened and out of control. This happens frequently when someone is diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, or with cancer, for example. They do not have a knowledge of why they got sick or what to do once they are sick. And along with this lack of understanding comes fear.
I have cancer. I'm terrified. Not gonna lie.
In 1 Chronicles 12:32, the Bible says, "And of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do."
Under what circumstances do our brains run away with the fear?
So they run away with the fear if we don't have accurate information.
Billions of people upon the earth do not have a correct understanding of the prophecies of the Bible. And when things begin to happen in the world that they do not expect, they will be controlled by fear. With a correct understanding of the prophecies, we may be like the wise children of Issachar, men that had understanding of the times, and therefore we would know what we ought to do. And the same holds true with our health. When Jesus warned us at the end of time, there shall be famines and pestilences. But even these we need not fear when we have an understanding of what we ought to do. In our world and in the Bible, there is an undeniable principle that only life begets life. And those things which promote life promote health. Pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness or temperance, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power, these are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. These natural, life-giving agencies, when rightly used, promote life and health. Pure air and plenty of oxygen is used by the lungs to purify the blood, thus invigorating the life-giving current which circulates throughout the body. Optimum oxygen levels give you more energy, enhance brain function, and lower stress. And a low oxygen environment deprives the cells of essential nutrients needed for energy to clean and rebuild. As a result, our body fluids and blood can become dirty and toxic. Lack of oxygen weakens every bodily system and is the main cause of disease. It weakens the immune system, which can lead to viral infections, DNA mutations, pathogenic bacteria, inflammation, heart disease, toxic buildup in the blood, and premature aging. The Mayo Clinic says when your blood oxygen falls below a certain level, you might experience shortness of breath, headache, and confusion or restlessness, as well as anemia, congenital heart disease, lung disease, pneumonia, and pulmonary problems with the lungs.
Low oxygen levels drive cancer growth. I identified that a deficiency of oxygen metabolism inside of cells is the prime cause of cancer.
With pure, fresh air playing such a large role in our health, the last thing we should want to do is inhibit the intake of oxygen with obstructions over the mouth and nose that simultaneously limit the exhaling of lung waste and make things worse by re-inhaling the toxic air the body just tried to expel. Rashes and acne problems and skin irritation are a few of the problems created, not the least of which is a state of hypoxia, or lack of oxygen in the system, poisoning the blood and making the individual more susceptible to disease instead of protecting them from it. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. And in order to have good health, we must have good blood. For the blood is the current of life. It repairs waste and nourishes the body. When supplied with the proper food elements and when cleansed and vitalized by contact with pure air, it carries life and vigor to every part of the system. Another life-giving agency is the sun. The National Institute of Health published a study in 2008 called Benefits of Sunlight, a Bright Spot for Human Health, in which they stated the best known benefit of sunlight is its ability to boost the body's vitamin D supply. Most cases of vitamin D deficiency are due to a lack of outdoor sun exposure. At least 1,000 different genes governing virtually every tissue in the body are now thought to be regulated by 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D3. Especially is sun exposure important, as new study found 80% of COVID-19 patients were vitamin D deficient. In addition to naturally boosting your immunity, a new study found that UV light can help kill bacteria. It shows that sunlight kills potentially harmful bacteria and improves air quality in indoor environments. Lockdowns forcing people to stay inside will only cause more harm to the public health. People need fresh air and sunshine for optimal health. Withholding these two life-giving and health-promoting agencies from the people will only make them more debilitated, discouraged, dependent, fearful, angry, and sick. Forcing people to re-inhale their own lung waste and remain indoors in order to promote health is a deadly deception. Even the best of intentions will not change the outcome of violating the natural laws of health. There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Just as God's life-giving agencies produce health and life, so the harmful agencies will have a corresponding effect. In Romans 13:10, the Bible says, "Love worketh no ill to his neighbor." Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Love is the fulfilling of the law because love works no ill or harm to his neighbor. This principle used to be embodied in the medical practice in the rule of first do no harm. But with the increase of allopathic medicine in the 20th century, this principle has been done away with, as all drugs and vaccines are inherently toxic and harmful because the substances in them are not only unnatural, but poisonous. Inserting formaldehyde, mercury, chicken proteins, and dog DNA, tissues from rats and mice, gelatin from pigs, monosodium glutamate, aluminum, aborted human baby cells, into a vaccine, for example, along with the virus itself, cannot be expected to produce life and health, as none of these ingredients on their own are life-giving agencies. And when combined together, they do not change their nature, but only make the effect of all these all the more toxic. As soon as the COVID vaccine became available in December of 2020, people started suffering its effects. Reuters reported Mexican doctor hospitalized after receiving COVID-19 vaccine. Severe reactions to COVID-19 vaccine closed schools in Michigan, Ohio, and New York. The majority of the teachers had experienced side effects after they received the second dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. They said, "We had so many folks down and out today that we didn't have enough people to staff the schools." And rather than place the blame on the problem, the school deferred the blame and denigrated the danger by jokingly calling it a snow day. The Israeli Health Ministry, Pfizer vaccine killed about 40 times more elderly than the disease itself would have killed. This was during a recent 5-week vaccination period, and among the younger class, these numbers are compounded to death rates at 260 times what the COVID-19 virus would have claimed in the given time frame.
After complaining of chest pain, he has been admitted to intensive care unit. He's being closely monitored by doctors. Vivek had got vaccinated just yesterday.
In India, Vivek Tamil, film actor, dies in Chennai hospital. In April, the big news in India was that the well-known Tamil film actor Vivek, who had recently become a health ambassador, took an experimental COVID vaccine live on TV to show everyone how safe it was and to encourage others to get the vaccine. The event backfired, however, when Vivek died less than 24 hours later.
Tamil actor and comedian Vivek has passed away this morning at 5 a.m. The Padma Shri actor suffered a heart attack and passed away this morning.
The number of injuries due to the COVID vaccine is equally as horrifying as the way the victims are dying. Haley Brinkmeyer received the shot Thursday, January 21st, and her mother posted on Facebook, "My 28-year-old daughter took the vaccine on a Tuesday and was dead by Thursday." 28-year-old mother and healthcare worker Sarah Stickles had an aneurysm and went into a coma. She died February 17th, 15 days after receiving the shot. 32-year-old Benjamin got the shot and died of heart failure 1 day later. 19-year-old Simone Scott was vaccinated May 1st and suffered heart failure May 16th, and despite a heart transplant, died June 11th. LaWanda Manning, the wife and aide to Senator James Manning, was excited to get her second shot on April 16th, but died June 11th. A 27-year-old engineer got the shot March 30th, was admitted to the hospital April 9th, and was dead by April 20th. 21-year-old John Francis Foley died 1 day after the shot. Tim Zook, an X-ray technician, also posted, "Never been so excited to get a shot before." Then, just hours later, suffered an upset stomach at work and began struggling to breathe. Within 4 days, he was gone.
Then, I went paralyzed.
Their 13-day timeline from vaccine to onset. Here we see January 23rd, 2021. And they say this is, the doctor said perfectly healthy. The last selfie, day 13, he's paralyzed. Paralyzed from the neck down. Honestly, I can't even watch it. I can't even look at this.
I have patients who can't walk anymore.
Yesterday, we heard the story of one officer who was forced to get the vaccine to keep his job and is now struggling to walk.
Less than 24 hours after receiving her second dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, she was unable to move from the neck down.
She lost feeling in much of her body just hours after getting Pfizer's COVID-19.
The person tested positive for COVID-19 in late December and was vaccinated January 21st and died several hours later.
Died yesterday shortly after he took the second dose of the anti-COVID vaccine.
Few reports of elders dying either hours or days after getting the vaccine are raising questions about the Pfizer vaccine's safety.
35-year-old Anne Van Geest died a week and a half after receiving the J&J shot.
29 people have died days after receiving the Pfizer vaccine.
There's nothing to suggest there's anything of concern here.
In Sweden, an 85-year-old man with pre-existing conditions died of a heart attack a day after getting the shot.
The government has confirmed the first death due to a vaccination in India.
Big news coming in. Government sources say that 234 hospitalizations and 71 deaths post-vaccination.
Medical experts confirming the death of a Central Coast woman is likely linked to the jab.
The Orange County Coroner's Office is investigating the death of a woman who passed away several days after getting her second Moderna vaccine.
The obituary for this Kansas woman says she died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. But medical experts say it's too early to say for sure what caused her death.
I'm a geriatrician. I work in nursing homes. I have had 21 patients that I've identified that have died within 48 hours of getting either the first or second vaccine from AstraZeneca.
New Zealand reports the country's first recorded death linked to Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine.
At least 154 Utahns have experienced bad reactions after receiving the vaccine.
That includes 4 people who died after they got the shot.
The death of his youngest daughter, Cassidy, came out of nowhere 4 days after her second dose of the COVID vaccine.
She came in early and said that her heart was racing.
In Israel, 2 elderly men died within 2 hours of getting it. And in Switzerland, a 91-year-old man died 5 days after getting vaccinated.
And health officials say at this point they cannot officially declare the cause of death.
114 million Americans, nearly half the adult population in this country, has had a vaccine shot already. 114 million of us have had it. The number of people who have died from getting the shot is 0.
3 more post-vaccination deaths reported, all of them from AstraZeneca.
Investigating the death of a doctor from Mount Sinai Medical Center who passed away 15 days after receiving a vaccine.
She says these deaths after vaccination were coincidental.
The 86-year-old Hall of Famer had just recently been given the COVID vaccine.
And just weeks ago was part of an effort encouraging Black Americans to get vaccinated.
But officials stress that had nothing to do with his passing.
Those who have died hours or days or weeks after being vaccinated number well into the tens of thousands. Their names and faces and stories are rarely told, and the vaccine as the cause of their death is never acknowledged. These are the victims of the mainstream media, for if they had been told the truth, they never would have gotten the jab. These are the faces and stories of just a small fraction of the victims of the vaccine that was said to be safe and effective and promised them life while delivering them to an early grave. Those who have recorded these stories for us are themselves overwhelmed, saying after documenting hundreds of cases, "We have over 3,000 additional testimonies to add to this compilation, but no time to do so." And many who have not died from the vaccine are suffering life-threatening or lifelong debilities and permanent irreversible damage to their bodies.
Urinating clots of blood, paresthesias, gastroparesis, altered mental status, respiratory arrest, cardiac arrest, new onset seizures, new onset diabetes.
She developed severe abdominal and chest pain, and the way she described the chest pain, and I quote, "It feels like my heart is being ripped out through my neck."
Patients who keep complaining that their feet and their hands are burning, they forget where they are. I've just never seen anything like this in all my years of practicing medicine.
Over the next 2.5 months, she developed additional symptoms that included gastroparesis, nausea and vomiting, erratic blood pressure and heart rate, memory loss, brain fog, headaches, dizziness, fainting, and then seizures.
Not just side effects, to the point where we had people who were once walking who are no longer walking. People who were once talking who could no longer talk, or who were once able to think could no longer think properly.
She developed verbal and motor tics. She had loss of feeling from the waist down and muscle weakness. Drastic changes in her vision.
A phone consult with Gibson's doctor confirmed that she had developed Bell's palsy, a form of facial paralysis.
4 participants in the Pfizer vaccine trial and 4 participants in Moderna's trial did experience Bell's palsy.
I am a COVID nurse. I have developed Bell's palsy.
I have Bell palsy now.
Urinary retention and loss of bladder control, severely irregular and heavy menstrual cycles, and eventually she had to have an NG tube put in to get nutrition.
The FDA and CDC called for a pause on the J&J vaccine after 6 cases of a rare severe blood clot.
There's a lot of patients being injured. I've never seen anything like this.
One physician labeled her as having functional neurologic disorder, saying it was due to anxiety.
I've lost count of the injuries.
18-year-old health worker has developed blood clots after getting her COVID vaccine.
Blood clotting events among some people who received COVID-19 vaccine.
Blood clots in his liver. 3 brain surgeries for blood clots.
The 18-year-old died after suffering from a brain hemorrhage and also from abdominal blood clot. But the surgeon who operated on her in attempts to save her life said even what he saw shocked him.
I had never seen a brain reduced in those conditions by a thrombosis so extensive and so severe. All the venous sinuses were obstructed by thrombi, a scenario I had never seen in my many years in this profession. From the picture I saw of that girl's head, it is clear we are facing something not normal.
2 hours from receiving the vaccine, I got Stevens-Johnson syndrome.
The AstraZeneca and the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines have been linked to rare but potentially serious neurological complications.
Can you talk to me? Can you say anything? Can you say anything, baby?
I have tremors in my hands, which has made me leery if I'll ever be able to practice as a hygienist again.
What starts happening?
It's been getting worse and worse since Friday. It's covering my entire body.
I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine yesterday. Started with chest pain, paralysis on my left side, about 8 seizures in the last 2 days. Never had a seizure before.
Thick, clotting, heavy menstrual cycles.
I physically seen people restraining the elderly and vaccinating against their will while they scream no.
There are companies like Pfizer which are bullying governments. Pfizer asked to be compensated for the cost of any future lawsuits. Pfizer wanted Argentina to put, and listen to this, put its bank reserves, its military bases, and its embassy buildings at stake as collateral.
Over 12,000 people who were inoculated with the Pfizer vaccine have tested positive for coronavirus in the state of Israel.
The hospitals are not full of COVID patients. The hospitals are full of vaccinated patients, okay? I've got friends that work in ICU at Flinders. 30 out of 38 patients currently are vaccinated. That is a fact, okay? The media is, I'm sorry, respectfully to the media, please start telling the truth.
It looks like almost all the vaccines are going to succeed.
Scientists at the CDC are investigating this morning after more than a dozen people who got the coronavirus vaccine have come down with myocarditis and inflammation of the heart.
There have been reports of more than 45 adverse reactions to the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine. TPH says it is looking into what may have caused this, including whether conditions at the site may have been too hot, but emphasized there is no reason to believe there is anything wrong with the vaccine itself.
Our residents are dying after they have taken this vaccine. And what troubles me, this is not even being spoken about. What bothers my heart is that it's almost like, don't talk about this.
Oh, this has been fact-checked, or this is misinformation, or this is not correct. It was so frustrating because you're trying to find an answer to what's going on, and you do what everybody else does, and you take it to Google, and there's nothing there except for information about why you should get the vaccine.
And with regard to vaccines, that has been a top priority for us. We removed over 1 million videos associated with COVID.
Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Let me tell you what I'm going to say. You are complicit in causing death. And I cannot wait to sue you over and over again.
We also state that COVID-19 should not be on list A for any longer, because we now know that it is a normal flu virus, and the normal flu virus isn't on list A. Panic is created by these false positive PCR tests. 89% until 94% of those PCR tests are false positive.
The measurement for it is not exact at all.
PCR test is a good test if it's done properly. It's not supposed to be used without symptoms, which it's been used everywhere without symptoms. The PCR test picks up some virus, but the more you cycle it, it can't tell if it's picking up a little bit of virus or a lot of virus. If it's picking up a live virus or a dead particle or an infectious part or an inactive. It can't tell. And the more times you cycle it, you get 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion times amplification. And you risk having a situation where you have a little tiny viral fragment that's been called positive, live, active virus.
PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what it is. But it's not, it doesn't tell you that you're sick.
We happen to know the number below which it's pretty accurate. 25, for example. Definitely over 35 is inaccurate. It's like 95% inaccurate. I'm not positive of the number. Everybody agrees. So you know what number they're using in America? Around 40, 38, 40, 42, 46. It's incredible. Everyone agrees. Fauci said over 35 is not accurate.
Of 35 or more, that the chances of it being replication competent are minuscule.
So it depends entirely on how much it's being cycled, but they also won't tell you when you've got your test what the cycle threshold was on your test.
They don't give them the threshold until you go back and ask for it.
In this video, it's easy to see why vaccines are so deadly. This person was vaccinated 30 minutes before this procedure, where the area of injection was cupped and the blood in that area pulled out of the arm. Within just a few moments of the blood gathering in the cup, you can see it has recongealed and become solid in the cup. Another substance that causes blood to coagulate like this is snake venom. The Bible warns of that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. And how is the world deceived? We read in Revelation 18 that by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The Greek word for sorceries is the word pharmakia, from which the medical industry gets the word pharmacy. It means witchcraft. The serpent is a charmer. He will use flattery and deception, and when sure of his prey, he will strike. When speaking of how a snake kills its prey, howstuffworks.com writes, "Those fangs are perfectly made to help inject poison into a hapless victim, usually its prey." And what does that venom do once injected? An article from the NIH about snake venoms states in the abstract, blood circulation, particularly thrombosis, and hemostasis is one of the major targets of several snake venom proteins. Thrombosis is defined as the formation or presence of a blood clot within a blood vessel. And what is the result of such coagulation upon the body due to the venom? The NIH article states aberrations in normal blood coagulation functions can result in thrombotic disorders or hemorrhage. In thrombosis, largely unknown conditions promote the apparently spontaneous formation of clots large enough to block circulation. Formation of such blocks in the arteries supplying vital organs, such as the heart or brain, can cause myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, or stroke, respectively.
The CDC is going to be holding an emergency meeting next week to talk about higher than expected cases of heart inflammation.
The CDC finding 16 to 24-year-olds who received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine have experienced higher than normal cases of myocarditis.
Myocarditis, cardiac condition.
He says several hundred cases of a rare heart condition are likely linked to the COVID vaccine.
We are talking 20-year-olds that have dropped dead. Nothing is getting on the media. Myocarditis is a rare, let me tell you, a rare cardiac condition. All of a sudden, every third 20-year-old's got myocarditis.
I got the second COVID shot Tuesday, and within 4 days, I have been diagnosed with myocarditis.
They informed me I developed pericarditis. Considering I've only had one vaccine. Then been dealing with the cardiologist, she's also informed me I've got some scarring of the heart, and they directly linked it to the vaccine. Also, my partner has developed myocarditis.
Sadly, my dad unexpectedly died at the end of January. He died of heart failure. Less than 24 hours before my dad had his first heart attack, he was given the Pfizer vaccination.
My mum had the vaccine done. She was fit and healthy, no underlying conditions. 11 hours after having the vaccine, she died of heart attack.
We've witnessed a lot of people dying of heart attacks shortly after the vaccine.
Sweden and Denmark have decided to stop using the COVID-19 vaccine from Moderna for certain age groups due to the risk of heart inflammation.
In March of 2021, Franklin Graham told ABC that Jesus would have taken the vaccine and promoted the use of it, saying he also got vaccinated, not knowing that 7 months later he would be having heart surgery due to inflammation of the heart.
He was suffering from constrictive pericarditis, which is a chronic inflammation of the membrane surrounding the heart.
As the utter failure of the vaccine and the methods of man to save life is opened more fully before the world, only then will many begin to see the necessity of putting their trust in God, realizing that cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. The serpent may also use another means by which to secure its prey, and that is constriction. Other larger snakes make use of constriction as a way to kill their intended victim. First, they catch them and then slowly wrap their bodies around them, squashing the life force out of the hapless prey.
Coiling itself around the large rodent, there is no escape. Anacondas don't kill with venom. They are constrictors. They compress the blood flow to their prey's heart, causing cardiac arrest.
And she got the vaccine on Monday, and then she wasn't feeling well. And then my dad said she just went into cardiac arrest this morning and they weren't able to revive her.
Now, think about that. When the prey is constricted, two things happen. The victim is not able to move, and the victim is not able to breathe. The definition of constrict is to become tighter and narrower, or to make something become tighter and narrower. The lockdowns, mandates, executive orders, and travel bans and quarantines have been an incessant and slow but aggressive constriction of the rights and liberties of human beings.
New mandates requiring proof of full vaccination to go out to eat, to go to the movies and other activities.
These orders, policies, and laws have both been focused on stopping people from moving and stopping them from breathing. It is evident that this is not the work of the God of love, but the work of the serpent in his last efforts to destroy the human race before his time is up. It is deeply saddening to see what is happening to those victims. One story that is buried were the 1,000 lawyers and 10,000 doctors that have filed a lawsuit for violations of the Nuremberg Code, citing crimes against humanity, in part because the CDC and World Health Organization are using PCR tests at 37 to 45 cycles, knowing that the tests are 100% faulty at 35 cycles and above. Even the CDC admits that any tests over 28 cycles are not admissible for a positive, reliable result, thereby concluding that this alone invalidates over 90% of the alleged COVID cases or infections tracked by the use of this faulty test. Furthermore, these lawyers and doctors state for many reasons that the experimental vaccine is in violation of all 10 of the Nuremberg codes, which carry the death penalty for those who seek to violate these international laws. This is just one example of the thousands of ways in which the truth is deliberately skewed to hide the real cause and to make the problem look like the cure.
Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are reducing the risk of infection by 91%.
And the real cure look like the problem.
Places with low rates of vaccination are actually seeing more disease.
We're still in a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Even the CDC has been caught deleting 6,000 COVID vaccine deaths from VAERS website. The truth of the matter is concealed, censored, manipulated, and buried because the news that the very thing that they believe saves life actually destroys life goes against their community guidelines. We are in the last days, and Satan is playing the game of life for the souls of men. Evil men are leaguing themselves with evil angels to bring upon the human family as much suffering and death as they can. The doctors, reporters, and CEOs, and all who obscure the reporting of the truth or manipulate the gravity of the crisis and deceive the people will have liars and murderers written next to their names in the books of heaven. And unless they repent and work to undo the evil they have done, will surely lose eternal life. When the disciples asked Jesus, "What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" his first words in reply were, "Take heed that no man deceive you." Jesus knew this is not what the devil will try to accomplish, but that he will accomplish. For the scriptures speak of him as the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. The VAERS system, as it's called, stands for Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. This system was put in place by the CDC and the FDA and the US Department of Health and Human Services to have a means by which they could trace, track, and monitor adverse vaccine reactions voluntarily submitted by nurses, doctors, healthcare providers, and by the general public.
I knew nothing of VAERS. I didn't know about our responsibility to report. It was never even talked about when these vaccines were rolled out. I definitely noticed an uptick in heart attacks, strokes, blood clots, gastrointestinal bleeds. It wasn't just me noticing it, everybody seemed to notice it. It became clear to me that there was something wrong. And I started reporting patients on my own. Well, very quickly that became a full-time job in and of itself. I would say within 3 weeks to a month, I had already had 50 patients reported. Our hospital system talked to their risk management team, and I was no longer allowed to report on any other patient but patients of my own that I saw, where there was a warning that I was told I must support the vaccine effort.
This chart shows the number of reports in the last 30 years that were said to have resulted in death. From 1990 to 2020, the number of deaths reported annually increased from about 80 in 1990 to 420 in 2020. Then the COVID vaccine was rolled out in December of 2020, and then by November 5th of 2021, 11 months later, the number of deaths had skyrocketed from an average of about 350 deaths per year to 18,461 COVID vaccine-related deaths to date. That is a whopping 4,295% increase from the previous year, and that is more than 2 times the number of deaths from all vaccines and from all the previous 30 years combined. But it gets worse, because according to the Lazarus Report, a 2010 study done on the number of events reported versus actual cases, found that fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse reactions are reported. That means the actual number of deaths occurring as a result of the COVID vaccines may potentially be over 1.5 million. If these trends continue at the present rate to the end of the year, it could mean around 2 million deaths worldwide by the end of 2021. But let's go a step further. The VAERS system reports a total of 875,651 adverse reactions from COVID vaccines. These would include deaths, but also other reactions, such as the 2,800 miscarriages, 9,000 heart attacks, 10,000 cases of shingles, and almost 11,000 cases of Bell's palsy, and almost 30,000 people who have been left disabled. And since the reported number of 875,651 adverse events is shown to be possibly fewer than 1% of the actual adverse reactions taking place, the total number of actual adverse reactions we would statistically expect to see would be closer to 87,565,100. But the very real risks of the vaccine have been obscured, ignored, manipulated, mocked, and even buried. The population of the United States is 332,278,200. And if 46 million people were infected, that's 13.9% of the population. And still, there are 654,412 adverse reactions reported in the United States through November 12th of 2021. Again, if the number of adverse reactions is less than 1% of the actual cases reported, we would statistically expect there to be as many as 65,441,200 adverse reactions in the United States alone. But according to the CDC, if infected, your chances of surviving COVID are above 99%, as the average number of fatalities per 1 million infections for those aged 0 to 64 shows your chances of survival to be 99.998%. And that is without any medical interventions, including vaccines. However, because fear is more compelling than reason, USAFacts.org reports on the nation's vaccine progress indicator that 228 million Americans, making up 70% of the country, rushed to willingly receive an experimental injection with a potential 25% chance of an adverse reaction, not excluding death, in lieu of a 13.9% risk of contracting a disease with a 99.99% survival rate, according to the CDC. Surely, there has got to be a better way to respond to this crisis, and there is. One physician wrote over a century ago concerning the health principles in the Bible, those rules were given by the Lord Himself, and when followed, produced the healthiest people that ever lived. Let it be noted, however, that inoculation was not included in the list of preventives of disease. Perfect cleanliness within as well as without the body is the sum of the whole matter. Clean food, pure water, fresh air, plenty of sunlight, regular muscular exercise, and a clean conscience will ward off any plague known. But to fill one's body with death as a means of warding off death is unscriptural and unscientific. When an individual is sick, they would do well to turn to the life-giving agencies God has provided free of charge in nature. We read in the Bible, and a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. And how often is this the case today, 2,000 years later? There are two primary but opposing principles in the treatment of disease. The allopathic method is the foundation of Western medicine. In 1810, Samuel Hahnemann coined the term allopathy, combining the Greek word allos, meaning different or opposite, with the Greek word pathos, meaning suffering. The idea being that allopathic medicine was based on creating an opposite effect of the symptom of disease. In an article titled Herbs, Food, and Medicine, we read allopathic means that a disease or a condition is treated with a substance that causes the opposite effect of the symptoms. For example, high blood pressure would be treated with drugs that lower blood pressure. But this method of practicing medicine does not treat the cause of disease. The article states, allopathy works to address symptoms. Symptoms are the body's way of reporting an imbalance. Merely treating the symptoms does not address the cause of the imbalance. This is one of the two main problems with allopathic medicine. It treats only the symptoms of disease, not the cause. Since this method of practicing medicine is the only method supported by the American Medical Association, Medicare, and most insurance companies, we can safely say the effect of Western medicine is to make you comfortable without actually healing you. In another article about allopathy, we read about allopathic medicine's attempt to alleviate the symptoms of disease by attacking or affecting the natural defense of the body. This is the second major problem with the allopathic method, is that it indiscriminately attacks and destroys the body in an attempt to destroy the symptoms of disease. This is most readily seen with cancer treatments like chemotherapy, which indiscriminately harms the body to such a degree. The goal is to bring the person as close to death as possible to kill the cancer, but without killing the person. Treatments like this and antibiotics, for example, do not selectively attack or kill harmful cells or bacteria. They indiscriminately attack everything. The real solution to fighting disease lies not in attacking the body, but in working with it, and in finding the cause that created the disease condition to begin with. And this is the principle behind the biblical method of healing. In Job, we read, "The cause which I knew not, I searched out." The biblical method of healing involves searching out the cause of disease. Without acknowledging or addressing the cause of disease, reversing the disease is impossible. The second principle of the biblical method of healing is that it advocates the use of medicinal plants, healthy foods, and the simple agencies of nature to assist the body in the restoration of health. In Psalms, we read about the herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth, and wine that maketh glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face to shine, and bread which strengtheneth man's heart. Here we see that herbs are to serve or minister to mankind and aid his health along with the food out of the earth. The words "out of the earth" here exclude animals and flesh foods, showing that our food is to consist of plants, that we may bring forth food out of the earth. Then there is the mention of oil to make his face to shine. Some oils, like coconut oil for example, are especially designed to support the health of the skin. Additionally, wine, here referring to the unfermented juice of the grape, as well as bread, are to strengthen man's heart, showing that these agencies are also designed to work with the body and to strengthen it in order to maintain health. These are just a few examples of the way in which plants are for the service of man. The Bible's methods of healing are entirely at odds with the allopathic method of medicine used by the world, which is why it may still be said of many today, as it was of the woman in Jesus' day, that she had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions should be changed, wrong habits corrected. Then, nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. Mark this statement wisely. It is the best method of treating all diseases known to man. First, we need to understand that disease is an effort of nature, or the body, to free itself from toxic and unhealthy conditions that are produced as a result of the violation of the laws of health. When we do not spend enough time outdoors in the sunshine, and breathing fresh air, and when we fuel our bodies with toxic and highly processed foods and dead flesh, meat and dairy, we are through these means transgressing the laws of nature, and disease is the natural consequence, and in the case of disease, the cause should be ascertained. In Proverbs 26:2, we read, "The curse causeless shall not come." Every disease has a cause, and whether it be the transgression of natural laws or moral laws, disease always has a cause. Since it is not the endeavor of allopathic medicine to ascertain the cause, it cannot ever cure anything. Ascertaining the cause is an absolute necessity for the reversal of disease. Once the cause is ascertained, the unhealthful conditions should be changed. An unhealthful condition can be exposure to environmental poisons, such as EMF radiation from Wi-Fi or cell towers, or mold, or drinking dirty water polluted by pesticide runoff, drugs, fluoride, and 1,000 other poisons often found in public water supplies. When the unhealthful conditions are changed, then wrong habits need to be corrected. Smoking and alcohol are obviously harmful habits, but so is eating conventionally farmed and genetically modified foods, or animal products like meat and dairy, cheese and milk. Casein, for example, the animal protein found in milk and all dairy products, was found in a 10-year-long China study to be the most relevant cancer promoter ever discovered.
In the China study, the most comprehensive health and nutrition study ever conducted, a stunning 30-year endeavor partnering Cornell and Oxford universities and concluding your diet can reverse cancer and heart disease, even get you off medications.
You know, casein, if we use the criteria that is used for determining what's a carcinogen, casein is the most relevant chemical carcinogen ever identified. Make no mistake about it.
The introduction or removal of casein from the diet could literally turn cancer on and turn it off. Harmful habits are not limited to food. A lack of sleep, not drinking enough pure water, or intemperance in eating are all harmful habits that would need to be corrected if disease is to be corrected. Once the unhealthful conditions are changed and wrong habits are corrected, then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. Assisting the body does not mean adding harmful chemicals, poisons, or viruses to it. Assisting the body means working with it. It means increasing the purity of the air, the water, and the food, and taking regular active exercise to promote the circulation of the blood and the function of all the organs. Assisting the body means increasing the quality and nutrition of the food so that the body's cells can be built up and strengthened, thereby enabling the expulsion of poisons and toxins that the body may have been holding on to for years. God has created in the body an innate ability to heal. And when the physician works with the body's natural immunity and natural efforts to detox and re-establish healthy alkaline conditions in the body, people would find that disease cannot survive or flourish in such a condition any more than darkness can resist the light. Not the least of these laws of health is to trust in divine power. Sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. Perhaps some living home trouble is like a canker eating to the very soul and weakening the life forces. Remorse for sin sometimes undermines the constitution and unbalances the mind. Chronic stress, unforgiveness, bitterness, and resentment are among some of the plagues of the mind that in turn produce a disease in the body. A great deal of the sickness which afflicts humanity has its origin in the mind and can only be cured by restoring the mind to health. In the Proverbs, we read, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones." A mind forgiven of its sins, liberated of angst, bitterness, and unforgiveness, can itself produce life and health in the system, and this is only obtained by a trust in God's divine power, and by casting all your care upon Him, for He careth for you. The truth about disease and the laws of health is liberating and beautiful, because these truths offer hope to the hopeless, life to the lifeless, and comfort to the afflicted, by showing that there is a balm in Gilead, and that God has provided free of charge the agencies of nature that all may have access to, that have the power to restore health and promote life. Just as perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment, so those methods of healing based on selfless life-giving principles cast out disease that brings affliction. It is in trust in the divine power of God that many afflicted may find a refuge and a rest. Not only rest in their own minds and bodies, but a spiritual rest in the divine power and providence of an almighty God. And those who proclaim the truth about the mark of the beast will know this rest themselves. For this is the issue at the heart of the mark of the beast crisis, and it is why this last test for man is designed to be over the matter of the rest of the Sabbath day. In this video, we have looked at the current events and how they are aligning to perfectly fulfill the ancient prophecy that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Through this pandemic, the world has, for the first time ever, globally embraced a means of controlling who can buy and sell, linking the legal right to participate in society with adherence to the mandates, decrees, and laws of men. Furthermore, the Roman Catholic social doctrine that demands the surrender of individual rights and liberties, even the right to say what substances enter into one's own body, has been well nigh universally embraced, even in the United States of America, that was founded not upon the rights and liberties of some, but of liberty and justice for all. The ideals of the common good have prepared the minds and values of our global culture to fall into line with those that will be used to enforce a mandatory day of rest. The common good is a Trojan horse, one that will bring this nation, once a beacon of religious liberty from the tyranny of popes and prelates of the Dark Ages, to one that is brought back into subjection to Satan through the Antichrist power. The satanic union of church and state, coupled with the hatred of individual rights and liberties that fueled the fires of the Inquisitions of the past, will be repeated all over the world, all in the interest of Sunday observance for the common good. The changes in our world as a result of the pandemic show us that we are today just moments away from the enforcement of the mark of the beast. The God of the Bible, who gave men free will and who will never mandate or demand the forceful coercion of that will, is in none of these things. Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." The choice is ours. We can receive him or turn him away. But unlike the rulers of earth, he will never violate our free will by compulsion of force. His plea is an invitation, saying, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This rest we are invited to enter into at the end of time, before Christ shall come. And to you who are troubled, rest with us, when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. In contrast to those who have entered into the rest of Jesus at the end of time are those who have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Most Christians today do not know this Sabbath rest. They have no knowledge of the true significance of the day and therefore regard it with indifference, saying it matters not which day it is, or they declare it to be an ancient relic of Judaism with no significance at all to the Christian. Yet, at the end of time, we read, "The dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." I would then ask, what is it that those Christians who refuse the mark will see in the Sabbath day that will strengthen them and inspire them to resist all the warfare and strength of Satan and his hosts, enduring the worst forms of persecution and reproach, losing the respect of friends, family, losing their jobs and houses and lands, being thrown into prison, beaten, or made an outcast of society, not being able to buy or sell? What is it that such Christians will see in the significance of the Sabbath that it could be said of them, "They loved not their lives unto the death"?
The planet is changing for the worse.
Build back better, blah, blah, blah.
A full nationwide lockdown starting Monday.
A joint agreement to limit global warming to 1.5
Erickson collapsing towards the end of the
hospital after collapsing on the tennis court.
These life-changing revelations we will see in part 3 of Unmasking the Mark. For almost 2 millennia, Satan has enshrouded the significance of the Sabbath day in error, confusion, and disrepute. But now is the time for all these things to be unmasked, because the darkness is past and the true light now shineth.